Granddaughter, run away from these people immediately. Get up in the morning and go to your family's house, and you'll see everything. Those were my late grandmother's words, spoken in a dream so vivid that I woke up gasping. The clock read 3:17 a.m. My heart was pounding. My wedding dress hung like a ghost on the wardrobe door. My name is Laia Monroe. I'm 28, and if you think you know how this ends, stay tuned. What would you do if someone you loved from the afterlife tried to save you from the living? The house was silent except for the ticking of the hallway clock. Beside me, Nathan, my fiancé, slept soundly, the rise and fall of his chest steady. Ordinary, too ordinary. I stared at the ceiling, my grandmother's voice echoing in my mind like a warning wrapped in love. By morning, I couldn't shake it. I told myself it was grief. She'd passed 2 years ago, the same month I'd met Nathan. Maybe my mind was just trying to tell me something symbolic. But as sunlight broke through the curtains, something inside me shifted like a tide turning. I slipped quietly out of bed, packed a small bag, and texted my mom, "Coming over." She didn't reply. When I arrived at my family's house 2 hours later, the front door was wide open, swinging slightly in the cold wind. Inside, I smelled coffee and something metallic, faint but sharp. "Mom?" I called out. No answer. The kitchen light flickered. There were plates on the table, 3 of them, with half-eaten food, as if someone had left in a hurry. Then I saw it. An envelope on the counter addressed to me in my mother's handwriting, sealed in red ink. And next to it, my grandmother's necklace, the one buried with her. My breath hitched. The silver locket glinted under the kitchen light. The same one Grandma Evelyn wore every day of her life. The one we buried with her. I reached out, my fingers trembling. The metal was warm. That shouldn't have been possible. "Mom?" My voice cracked, swallowed by the silence. No footsteps, no movement, only the faint hum of the refrigerator. I opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of paper covered in my mother's handwriting, but the words weren't a letter. They were numbers, columns of them. Account numbers, transaction codes, and one handwritten note at the bottom. "If anything happens, trust no one, especially Nathan." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Nathan, my fiancé. I sank into a chair, scanning the numbers again. The first one looked like a bank account, and I recognized the prefix. It matched the company Nathan claimed to work for. Then my phone buzzed, a text from him. "Morning, love. You disappeared early. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. If Grandma's warning and my mother's note were connected, something much darker was going on. I typed back slowly, "Family emergency. I'll call later." Then, meeting air, I stepped outside. The wind whipped through the maple trees, carrying the faint chime of the old porch wind bell, the one Grandma hung the summer before she died. It hadn't made a sound in years, not even during storms. Now it rang once, sharp, deliberate. I looked down the street. A black car I didn't recognize was parked across from the house, engine idling. For the first time, I realized Grandma's warning might not have been metaphorical. It was protection, and whatever was coming had already started. The car didn't move for almost 5 minutes. I stood frozen on the porch, pretending to scroll through my phone, while my heart drummed in my ears. Finally, it rolled away, slow, deliberate, like whoever sat inside wanted me to see it leave. I locked the door behind me and went straight to the old guest room, Grandma's room once. The air smelled faintly of her lavender perfume, even after 2 years. On the dresser sat her framed photo, smiling as if she'd been expecting me all along. That's when my phone rang. Dad. I hesitated before answering. Dad, where's Mom? A pause. Then, she's fine. Just out running errands. Where are you, Laya? Something in his voice didn't sound right. Too measured, like every word was being weighed before release. At home, I lied. Good. Don't drive anywhere. Nathan's been worried sick. He called me when you didn't answer. My stomach twisted. How did Nathan even know to call him? I muttered something vague and hung up. Immediately, I opened my grandmother's jewelry box, the one she used to keep under her nightstand. Inside, besides a few old rings, was a small folded photograph of my mom and grandma standing in front of a property I'd never seen before. On the back, in faded ink, it read, Riverside Storage, Locker 213, for LaToya Monroe. My pulse raced. I searched the address online. It was 15 minutes away. Whatever my grandmother and mother had been hiding, it was waiting there for me. I slipped a locket into my pocket, grabbed my car keys, and whispered toward the photo on the dresser. Okay, Grandma, I'm listening. The old wind bell chimed again as I stepped outside. It wasn't the wind this time. It was a signal. The storage lot looked deserted when I arrived. Rows of metal doors shimmered under a flat gray sky, each numbered, identical, anonymous. Locker 213 sat near the back, half hidden behind a stack of broken pallets. My pulse thudded as I entered the code for my mother's note. The lock clicked open with eerie ease. Inside, dust and silence. A faint smell of paper and old wood. A single bulb flickered overhead. Against the wall stood a metal cabinet, and beside it, a trunk I recognized instantly. Grandma's old cedar chest. Kneeling, I lifted the lid. Bundles of documents, folders marked with dates, one photo album. On top, a USB drive labeled Riverside Investments. I plugged it into my laptop, the screen lighting up the dark room. A spreadsheet appeared, millions of dollars moving between names I knew. Nathan's employer, my father's company, and an offshore account under my mother's initials. At the bottom, one line stood out in red font. Beneficiary, LaToya Monroe. Trustee transfer pending. My pulse raced. I wasn't supposed to marry Nathan. I was supposed to inherit something they wanted to control. Footsteps scraped outside. I froze, closing the laptop. The lock rattled. LaToya. It was Nathan's voice. Baby, what are you doing here? I stayed silent, staring at the shadows beneath the door. I just want to talk, he said softly. Your mom said you ran off. What's going on? I forced a shaky breath. How did you know where I was? He hesitated, then gestured at the open laptop. Because that's our company data, LaToya. You shouldn't have touched that. Our company? The words hit like a slap. I closed the computer and stood, keeping the trunk between us. You're laundering my grandmother's estate money, aren't you? His expression hardened, the mask slipping. You don't understand the scale of what you're playing with. I understand enough, I said quietly. Grandma left the trust to me. That's why my mom warned me. That's why you married me. He stepped closer, hand raised, not to strike, but to reach. LaToya, please, you're overreacting. It's complicated. Then simplify it, I whispered. He sighed, running his hair through his hair. Your parents invested in something risky. We just redirected funds to protect everyone. It's not theft, it's damage control. I laughed, short and bitter. So Grandma was right. You all were in it together.
His jaw tightened. "Put the files back, and we'll forget this happened." The air between us crackled. I reached into my pocket, gripping the small locket. My thumb brushed something inside it. A tiny button I'd never noticed before. Click. A faint red light blinked on my laptop screen.
"You should go," I said softly, "before the wrong people hear you." The red light blinked again, steady, waiting. He turned wordlessly and walked out. And for the first time, I realized Grandma hadn't saved me from a wedding. She'd saved me from a crime. The next 24 hours were a blur of adrenaline and quiet planning. I stayed at a hotel near downtown, the laptop locked in the safe, replaying Nathan's words in my head. "You don't understand the scale." That line alone was enough to tell me this went beyond him. My parents were part of it, had been for years. By morning, I met with a private investigator I'd found through one of Grandma's old contacts, a retired reporter named Helen. She looked like someone who'd seen the inside of too many secrets. "Your grandmother hired me once," Helen said, scanning the USB's files. "She suspected your parents were diverting her charity funds before she died." The room tilted. "She knew." Helen nodded. "She set up a parallel account in your name to protect the inheritance. You're the legal successor, Lataya. They can't touch it without your signature." I leaned back, shaking. All those whispers at family gatherings, the secrecy about finances, it suddenly all made sense. "Can you prove it?" I asked. Helen smiled thinly. "Already can? The signatures are forged, and your fiancé's company? A shell operation. He's listed as the co-beneficiary under your mother's authorization." My phone buzzed. A message from Nathan. "You don't have to do this. Just come home. We can fix it." I showed Helen. She snorted. "Classic guilt bait. Record everything. Tomorrow morning we take it to the police and the trust office." When I left her office, I walked along the river, wind snapping against my coat. For the first time in days, I didn't feel scared. I felt armed. Grandma hadn't just warned me, she'd handed me the truth wrapped in a dream. And now it was my turn to wake everyone else up. By dawn, I was ready. Helen had compiled everything: bank records, signed transfers, emails linking Nathan's company to my parents' offshore accounts. The web of deception was staggering, but the proof was watertight. We met at the Trust Oversight Bureau downtown, a sleek, glass building that looked too clean for the kind of rot it handled. Inside, I handed over the flash drive and the notarized statements. The investigator nodded once. "We'll begin proceedings immediately, Miss Monroe." That afternoon, the dominoes began to fall. By 3 p.m., my parents' accounts were frozen under suspicion of tax fraud. By 4 p.m., Nathan's company profile vanished from the corporate registry database. And by sunset, I received an official notice confirming that the Monroe Trust had been reinstated in my sole name, full ownership, retroactive from the date of Evelyn Monroe's passing. I sat in my car, staring at the letter in stunned silence. Grandma's name was printed there, formal and powerful. I could almost hear her laugh, that low, knowing sound that used to fill her kitchen. My phone buzzed again. Nathan, then Mom, then Dad. I didn't answer. Instead, I texted one line to all three. "Grandma was right. I saw everything." Mom replied instantly. "Lataya, please, we can explain." I muted the thread. At home, I poured myself tea in Grandma's floral cup, the one she'd left me for courage. Emma, no, not Emma. My mind slipped. That was from another life. I smiled to myself. This time, there was only me. Outside, the wind bell chimed again, softly, twice. It wasn't warning me anymore. It was saying goodbye. Tomorrow,
The world would know the truth, but tonight I let peace sound like her voice. The story broke 2 days later. Aris expose, multi-million-dollar fraud ring, fiancé and parents implicated. The headlines stretched across every local news feed, accompanied by my grandmother's smiling photo from the charity gala years ago. Helen called that morning. "You did it, Lataya. You freed her legacy." The word free made my throat tighten. For the first time, I wasn't the daughter cleaning up their mess. I was the woman carrying forward my grandmother's name. When I walked into the foundation's legal office to finalize the trust transfer, the receptionist handed me a sealed envelope. This was mailed last week, no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter in my grandmother's looping script, the ink faint but unmistakable. "If you're reading this, you saw through them. Never let their greed define your worth. What we build from love cannot be stolen." I pressed the paper to my chest. Tears came, quiet and steady, not of grief, but of release. That evening, I returned to her old house by the river. It was empty now. My parents had been evicted, their assets under investigation. The place was silent, except for the soft rattle of that faithful wind bell. I opened the windows and let the cold air rush through, carrying the smell of rain and cedar. For once, it didn't feel haunted. It felt clean. Standing in the doorway, I whispered, "I kept your promise, Grandma." Then I locked the door behind me, not in fear, but in closure. The headlines would fade, the noise would pass, but the truth she left me would live on in every dollar now rebuilding lives in her name. The woman they tried to silence had become their reckoning.